Margaret was 72 years old when her own son kicked her out of the house, and all because of one simple reason: she lost her job. No screaming, no tears, just the sound of a door clicking shut behind her, quiet but final. It didn't slam, it didn't need to, because sometimes silence can break a heart louder than any shout. She stepped outside with a worn-out suitcase and a grip so tight on the handle you'd think she was holding her whole life in it. Maybe she was. Her son David stood in the doorway, arms crossed, avoiding her eyes. Sarah, his wife, leaned against the frame behind him, wearing that half-smile people use when they've finally gotten what they want. "You can't stay here anymore, Mom," David said, his voice flat. "We've got kids' bills. We just can't carry you too, I'm sorry." No one hugged her, no one asked if she was okay. She'd once skipped meals to buy David his first college textbook. Now, she was just a burden with no paycheck, and so she walked one step at a time, dragging the suitcase that scraped the sidewalk like it was whispering, "You're on your own now." But what David didn't know, what nobody knew, was that inside her worn leather purse was a debit card and access to a hidden bank account holding $1.4 million. Margaret didn't cry, not when she left the porch, not when her legs started to ache halfway down Cedar Street, not even when she sat on the cold wooden bench at the bus stop 3 blocks from the house that used to be hers. She just sat there, back, hunched, hands folded tightly over the handle of her purse, watching the world pass by as if it had already forgotten her. What David didn't know was that Margaret hadn't been fired, she'd resigned. Her back had been giving out. The doctor warned her about lifting heavy boxes, said it could damage her spine permanently, so after years of helping out at the church thrift store, she quietly stepped away. The pastor asked her to stay. She smiled, said she needed rest, and she did. She needed to rest from a lifetime of survival. She had raised David alone after his father died, in a construction accident, cleaned motel rooms, scrubbed hospital floors, and said no to new shoes so he could have textbooks. She did it with pride, with love, but the hardest part of motherhood, she now realized, wasn't the sacrifice. It was the silence afterward, when the very people you gave everything to stop seeing you. She had known hunger. She had known loneliness. She had known what it meant to count coins in a dark kitchen and pretend the flickering light bulb was just fine, but she had never known this rejection from her own child. Still, she didn't hate him, she couldn't. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a deed, old, yellowed, and stamped 34 years ago. After her husband passed, the insurance company sent a modest payout tucked into the back of the envelope. Was something everyone else overlooked. A land deed, 40 acres in a remote corner of the state left by an uncle they barely remembered. Back then, people said it was worthless. No water, no road, no power. Sell it for a couple thousand, they said, but Margaret didn't. Every year, she scraped together enough to pay the taxes. Even when she had nothing, she held on to it just in case, she'd whisper to herself. Last fall, a man in a suit showed up at the church. Said he was with a development company. They were building a solar energy facility and needed that specific stretch of land. He made an offer. Margaret didn't blink. She asked one question: can this remain private? 3 weeks later, the money, $1.4 million, was quietly transferred into a trust managed by a non-profit in her husband's name. To the outside world, she was still just Miss Margaret, with her sensible shoes, second-hand coat, and little apron she wore while serving coffee at Sunday brunch. But now she had options. That night, Margaret didn't check into a hotel. She spent the night at a women's shelter, not because she had to, but because she wanted to sit beside people who wouldn't ask her what she had. People who had once been invisible, like her. She shared what little food she had in her bag, listened to their stories, laughed softly when someone told a joke, held a woman's hand when she cried about a daughter who wouldn't call her back, and for the first time in a long time, Margaret felt seen. The next morning, she visited a rundown cottage on the edge of town. It had cracked windows, peeling paint, and wild weeds climbing the porch railings. She paid cash 3 weeks later, under the name Hope Holdings, LLC. The place was transformed: fresh paint, a fixed roof, solar panels, a new garden, but no one knew it was hers, and that was exactly how she wanted it. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want the neighbors talking. She didn't want David or Sarah to come crawling back just because she had money. What Margaret wanted was to build something that would never throw anyone away, so she did. She began volunteering at food pantries, shelters, and youth centers quietly, asking what they needed, secretly funding repairs, donating under names no one could trace. And when the time came, she bought a building, an old community hall boarded up for years. She named it Margaret's Table. It wasn't fancy, but it had warmth, real warmth. Hot soup, clean cots, soft music, a place for people who had nowhere to go. People like her, people who'd been forgotten not because they were unworthy, but because they had nothing left to offer. Margaret offered anyway because she remembered, and because somewhere deep down she still hoped her son would remember too. 2 years passed, the seasons turned quietly, the world moved on, and Margaret, well, she bloomed in silence. Margaret's Table had become more than just a building. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat. Soup simmered on the stove each morning. Children played in the back garden under sunflowers, taller than their heads, and every Friday night, lights glowed through the windows as people gathered for community dinners, no questions asked, no paperwork needed. But elsewhere, life had not been so kind. David lost the house at first. It was small things, missed payments, rising bills. Then the notice came, then the locks changed. Sarah left, took the kids, said she needed stability. David tried side gigs, warehouse shifts, even sold his old guitar, but nothing stuck. Eventually, he ended up sleeping on a friend's basement cot, sharing ramen with roaches, and wondering where everything had gone so wrong. One rainy afternoon, he wandered into the public library just to stay dry. He saw a flyer near the front desk. Cream-colored paper, elegant script, a small wooden logo that looked oddly familiar. Margaret's Table, meals, shelter support, no one left behind. He froze, his fingers trembled as he read the name again. Margaret couldn't be, but the ache in his chest said otherwise. He stared at the address. He knew the street, walked past it 100 times, never paid attention. The next morning, something pulled him there. Call it guilt, call it hope, call it the last thread he had left. He walked across town in worn shoes and found it a small building, freshly painted, framed by wildflowers. Children laughed inside, steam curled out from a kitchen vent, and above the front door, carved into wood, were the words, Margaret's Table. Everyone has a place. He stepped inside. Warmth met him instantly. Not just heat, but presence. The smell of fresh bread, the soft clatter of dishes, volunteers moving gently like they belong. And then behind the reception desk, in a beige cardigan, her silver hair tucked behind her ears, sat a woman he hadn't really looked at in years, his mother. She looked up, her eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. David froze, his throat, burned words caught like gravel in his mouth. I didn't know where else to go, he whispered. Margaret stood slowly, walked around the desk, stopped just in front of him. David couldn't meet her eyes. He was shaking. I lost the house. Sarah's gone. I have nothing. Silence then. Margaret spoke soft and steady. Come inside, you look cold. She led him to a small table, set a mug of warm tea in front of him. He looked around, still dazed. This place, it's yours? He asked. She nodded. I thought you had nothing, he said. I had peace, she replied, and enough. His voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me that you had money, that you were okay? She looked at him gently. Would it have changed anything? He didn't answer. I needed to know, she continued, who'd stand by me when I had nothing to give. That's how I knew who to build this for. I was awful to you, he said. You trusted me. I threw you out. Margaret reached across the table and took his hand. You forgot yourself, she said. That doesn't mean you can't find your way back. And in that moment, David cried, not loudly, not theatrically, just a quiet, steady stream that spoke of shame and gratitude, and the kind of forgiveness that feels like being born again. Spring came slowly that year, soft rain, new leaves, and something like healing blooming in small, quiet ways. David started volunteering at Margaret's Table. He fixed broken chairs, sorted canned goods, helped patch leaks in the roof. He didn't ask to be paid. He just showed up every day like he was making up for all the ones he missed. Margaret didn't say much. She didn't have to. Every Friday evening, they sat together on the porch, watching the children play in the garden. No guilt, no punishment, just presence and peace. One of those evenings, Margaret handed him a sealed envelope. David looked at her, puzzled. He opened it. Inside was the original deed to the house, the one she'd once given him, and the voided check from the land she sold framed together. He looked up, speechless. You don't owe me anything, Margaret said. But now you know what happens when love comes before pride. David couldn't answer, he didn't need to. He finally saw her, not just as mom, not as the woman who used to pack his lunches or stay up when he was sick, but as a whole person, someone who had been broken and still chose kindness. Margaret passed peacefully in her sleep that fall. No headlines, no long speeches, just a small wooden service attended by more than 100 people. People from shelters, schools, churches, people who knew exactly who she was. David stood at the front holding her favorite apron. He took a breath and said softly, "My mother left a house once with nothing but a suitcase and a quiet heart. But in that silence, she built something bigger than any of us ever knew." He turned toward the doorway above it, carved into the wooden arch, were the words Margaret had written herself the day the shelter opened. The doors that close behind you can never match the ones you open for others. And David, once angry, once lost, had become the man his mother always believed he could be, not because she had money, but because she chose love over revenge and forgiveness over pride.